As you've been hearing in the news, obviously, we know that with this 10 p.m. curfew on pubs and restaurants, it's going to hit that sector of the economy very hard. Only this morning, we learned that Whitbread, the owner of Premier Inn Hotels and also Brewers Fayre, is going to cut 6,000 jobs. And in the last half hour, we've heard the pub chain Wetherspoon plans to cut up to 450 of the 1,000 jobs it has at 6 airports across the UK. That was in a letter to its staff. Well, the letter came from the founder and chairman, Tim Martin, who joins us now. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. So another 450 jobs to go. Why have you decided now to announce those job losses?
Well, we've got quite a few pubs at the airports which are actually shut. So, for example, South Terminal, Gatwick, one of the busiest terminals possibly in the world at some points, is completely closed, and that's true of various other places where things have moved around the airports and they're operating from a lesser number of facilities. So inevitable, unfortunately.
So these jobs were kept under furlough, and now, well, with the prospect of October the 31st, that furlough scheme ends. You say basically you can't afford to keep those people on.
Well, we've had a lot of people on furlough. Obviously, 40,000 when the pubs were shut. We'd hoped that no one would be made redundant, but with the advent of various quarantine regulations and so on, as the airport operators and airlines have said, there simply aren't as many jobs at the airports as there were before.
Okay. Now, since the 4th of July, the pubs reopened. A lot of your branches had reopened, and we have seen more and more people returning. But we know that business is down an awful lot for virtually everybody compared with previous years, obviously because of the social distancing rules, and lots of people still afraid to go out and about. What do you make of this talk of a 10 p.m. curfew that's going to be announced by the Prime Minister at lunchtime today? All pubs, bars and restaurants must close at 10 p.m. Table service only. That's going to be by law. What effect is that going to have on your business?
Well, we reference your first point. Pubs had started to make quite a good recovery. That we were adapting to social distancing rules. So were customers. They weren't all coming out on Saturday. They were coming out earlier in the day, earlier in the week, and so on. A lot more outside space. So, given a few months to think about it and sort it out, publicans are intelligent, the public's intelligent, and it was sort of working. But the great problem we have is constantly chopping and changing rules, as if no one really knows what to do. So we've had moonshots, circuit breakers, rules of 6, mingling, and now the curfew. The curfew doesn't even stand up to 5 minutes consideration by an intelligent person.
Tell us why.
Because if you look at the stats, as Birmingham City Council have done, for example, then you know from the data that there are relatively few transfers of infections in pubs. Pubs are, in spite of the myths, trying very hard to social distance. And as a number of eminent professors have said, if you don't go too close to anyone, you won't get the virus. But unfortunately, and that is scientifically proven along with hand washing, those are the two things you know. But what does a curfew do? It says everyone has to go at 10 o'clock. So that doesn't mean you can't get a virus. And many of us listening to your show have been 18, 19, 20,
Oh, yes.
whatever it is in the past. And so what are you going to do at 10 o'clock? Go home to mum? It's just putting too much pressure on. So what you've got at the moment, this is a crazy thing. You've got 3.2 million hospitality workers, almost all of whom are doing their level best to enforce social distancing measures. And the statistics show with a great deal of success. So now what you're doing is they're all going to stop work at 10 o'clock as far as customers are concerned. And the customers, who's going to enforce social distancing after that, or persuade people to social distance after that? And do you know the response of the government? The police. They don't trust the people at all. In contrast to Sweden, where they're getting good results now, they've got 2 rules. Well, they've got 3. They've got social distance, wash your hands, and trust the people. If you tell the people what's good for them and for their colleagues and for the public and for their businesses, they'll do it. And that's what we found in pubs. Over 800 of our pubs, not a single infection, not one.
And this is the thing, isn't it? We're told that, look, there's problems with lack of social distancing in some places, and we saw that over the summer during lockdown. Oh, you managed to get, one picture of people at an angle on the beach or in the park and say, oh, no one's obeying the rules. My experience is the vast majority of people vast majority of people are obeying pretty much all the rules all of the time. And we know most landlords are. Do you not think it would have been a simpler measure if pubs or restaurants were a concern for, and I've been banging on about this for weeks now, 2 cabinet ministers who all think I'm crazy apparently, that they simply enforce the laws that we've got? Because as someone who runs pubs, if you don't enforce the law, if there is trouble repeatedly, you can lose your licence. If you serve repeatedly people under 18, you could lose your licence. If they simply made it clear, if we come in here and there is any failure to social distance and you're in charge, your licence is gone. Would that not focus the minds of those few pub landlords who are not doing their job properly to do their job?
Of course it would, Julia, but you're shooting the wrong fox in a way. You can do that, and that's always part of the pub licensing system, and it's very rigorously enforced by the police, by licensing officers, by local authorities, and by health officers. But the problem is that's hard. That's not the area where there are transmissions of the virus taking place. They're taking place far, far more, 20 times as many in homes, in care homes, in hospitals, etc. So yes, that would be part of the normal process. So what's the government actually aiming at? And I think what it's aiming at is PR. It's aiming at the misconception that pubs are centres of the transfer of the virus. And the idea that pubs are the centre of transfers of the virus has a certain plausibility. When we think of pubs, we think of what we did in our youth, music blaring, people dancing. 99% of the time it's not like that. And anyway, music's now gone. People know they have to social distance. So I can only assume that the government is done some sort of poll, and people believe that pubs might be or are the centres of infection, and it's not trying to counteract that with factual evidence. It's engaged in a PR exercise. I'll tell you what, if I could just make one more point, I'd really love to see this debated in Parliament. I've seen Lord Sumption and Baroness Hale, former Supreme Court judges, say that the country, and Graham Brady, who's a Conservative MP, the country's now being ruled by decree. You've got a bunch of people, all from a very similar background, who've never dealt with a pandemic before. They may have studied them, mathematicians, etc., and they're arriving at very stupid conclusions. They don't know what to do, and we've got to I'd love to see Parliament debate this for a week. There's a sensible proposition that the Swedes have adopted a different approach. It seems to be working really well. What is the scientific evidence for lockdowns versus the scientific evidence for hand washing and social distancing?
I think a lot of us would welcome that.